You
you're
act
supposed
big
to-
and they chill out, and yeah.
And
that
again,
makes
I don't know what
sense.
the hell I'm talking about.
No, I saw a video.
Agreed.
This guy was marching through the forest, and this bear was like following him. And so then he whips out the bear mace and he just sprays this thing and like crazy, and it was pissed. And I thought he was gonna be dead right there.
From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, real bears, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously to podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. And now broadcasting from the churn, that guy's Dr. Jim Jobin, and I'm Nick Tangeman, and it's time for some Pod Therapy.
If you're wondering
What goes on in Patreon?
what animals could you fight at a zoo and maybe win? Boy, did we do a deep dive. There's some great, and you know what? There's science. I'm not going to lie. There's some science applied to this. We've really done the thinking. We had a national survey that was part of the discussion.
Yep.
We got into the actual like physical weight abilities and strength conditions of various animals.
And you.
And yes, and I think I don't hear any solid persuasive argument for why my tactic wouldn't work. I do feel I would defeat the gorilla
Right
applying
in.
the strategy that I've offered.
Right in.
It's a solid strategy.
What zoo animal
Yeah.
do you think Jim could take in a fight?
Biggest
what
available.
What is the maximum
There it is.
zoo animal
Yes. Yeah.
that Jim can take in a fight?
We've mutually agreed that there's an entire tier
Jim's
that I'm just
guess
going to
is
whoop. it.
gorilla,
Yeah.
and that's ridiculous.
Look, I'm not saying the biggest gorilla. I'm saying there's like a gimpy, sickly gorilla somewhere.
No, I'm
and
taking
I
that
can
gorilla.
get him in a fair.
I'm taking that
if
gorilla.
I get him by
Yeah.
surprise.
And we're talking adult animal,
Yes,
animal
yes.
only.
Yeah, I'm
We're
not a monster, Jacob.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're not talking
of
like
course it's an
baby
adult.
gorilla,
No, of course not.
and it can't be like a zoo in Texas where just like a fertilized gorilla cell counts as a gorilla.
Right.
I think it's got to be like some quote unquote zoo in like Missouri in like Tiger King style with like some emaciated
But we
gorilla.
know those
I have a
animals
shot.
are going to kick your ass.
Yeah.
Wasn't one of the people on Tiger King? Didn't they get their arm
They
bitten
did.
off?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they did. Good
yeah.
Lord. We need to go back and rewatch that whole thing.
No.
The thing was golden. So if you have your thoughts
Tiger
on
King, the biggest beneficiary of COVID.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but not Joe. Not Joe Exotic. He's still in prison. He never did get his pardon. If you'd like to vote and let us know what animals I would likely prevail against, even though the answer is almost all of them, patreon.com/therapy. You can join the conversation on
And
the episode.
separate question, what animal would you like to see Jim
Yeah,
fight?
yeah. We're now taking bets and bids. So if you're out there and you're like, man, I just have a fuck ton of money and I have nothing to do with it, and I'd really like to see Jim fight an exotic animal, hey, patreon.com/therapy.
And we discussed, if you want, I'll just put a gorilla costume on.
It's an option.
And beat the shit out of Jim.
There's always an
There's a
economical
Patreon
way.
level for that.
There's always an economical way to solve
Don't
a problem.
threaten Jacob with a good time.
Listen, the chokeout strategy works. If I have the advantage or the initiative, I feel I have a good shot at that gorilla.
I don't.
God, the anatomy checks out, man.
Jim, you ignorant slut.
We have a lot of good questions today. And we're starting off with addicted to masturbating. There you go. Hey guys, writing in with this question from a friend with my friend's permission to get your answer to it. This is also totally...
Because the other friend is too busy to type.
Yep. This is also totally episode...
Had to.
No, that was... Oh, you nailed it. Now I just got that joke.
Yeah, you got there.
Yeah, well done.
And you think you can outsmart a gorilla.
No, I feel like I can choke one out.
You didn't even catch the masturbation joke.
This is also totally the episode that I'm going to use to try to get him to start listening. Okay, great. So we gotta shine, guys. All right. My friend masturbates a lot, like 4 to 5 times a day.
Okay.
And describes himself as a sex addict. When we're having conversations about this, to me, it seems more just to be a thing he does when he's bored or has free time, and he's got a high sex drive. Are there potentially more productive things that he could be doing? Sure. But he's not going into debt, buying porn, or missing work or family functions. At what point do you tip the line into addiction with a behavior like this? It seems like a lot of the stigma around sexuality comes into play too, since no one bats an eye at the stupid shit I spend 3 hours a day doing, but once it's sex, there's a whole bundle of shame and drama associated with it. Thanks, your friendly neighborhood producer.
I can't help but notice that you didn't go into detail about the things that you do for 3 hours a day.
Yeah, a little
Just to see if we,
suspicious.
I mean, I'm betting we might bat an eye.
Apples to apples, we'd like to know.
Yep.
If you want a fair comparison, you got to put it all on the table, writer, producer or not.
All right.
I mean,
so
if it starts to chafe,
that's definitely, well,
Yeah.
I mean,
harm.
yeah, in a sense, you're right, because
Yep.
you're onto something, which is it
Can you
causing
not waggle around that ice
a-
cream cone while you're talking
I'm
about
sorry,
this?
it's just
Yeah.
right here. I
Yeah, and Jacob, don't get out the banana again.
work with
Yeah,
my
there
hands.
It is.
There it is.
He's swinging it over his head. I wish we had a Twitch.
Like anything,
need to know.
Like anything with that we would treat as far as a diagnosis, it has to cause a clinically significant amount of distress.
Yep.
So whenever we talk about addiction, and just to kind of clarify as far as addiction goes, we wouldn't diagnose addiction. It would be like if it's a substance, it would be a substance use disorder. If
Right.
it's gambling, it would be a problem gambling disorder, or
Right.
it'd be something like that. Addiction itself isn't actually a diagnosis, but the simplest way to explain it, the most common layman's way of explaining it, would be the 4 C's of addiction.
Yeah.
So compulsion, craving, consequences, and loss of control.
For 1 second, I thought you said the 4 seasons. And I was like, oh.
Yes, Frankie Valley. So if you're masturbating a lot,
Like a man, masturbate like a man.
Masturbate like a man, like a man. Go on.
you know what? I lost my train of thought.
Yo, you were solid there for
Your
a
4
second.
C's.
4 C's, yeah. So the 4 C's of addiction: compulsion. Having that overpowering urge that
Doing
fuels
the
that
doo-wop
behavior.
elbows over here.
Cravings. So when the person isn't able to masturbate or doesn't have access or
Right.
whatever, for whatever reason, has that craving that's constantly
An emotional
there.
or physical like energy that brings
Right.
them back to it.
Consequences. So that would be like if there's consequences behind that, but the behavior continues despite consequences.
Negative ones. Yeah, like
Right.
you are hurting yourself in your health.
Right.
Or taking risks.
Which it
like you're
sounds
starting
like-
to do it in public and that's a crime and it's increasingly getting bad, or the things that you're accessing online are putting you in financial or legal danger, things like that. Negative consequences, and you're still doing it
Missing
anyway.
out on family events.
Right.
But as it sounds like from the letter, that's not happening.
No.
And then a loss of control. So the easiest way to think of loss of control is trying to set limits but not being able to enforce them.
Right. Or cutting back, right? You promised
Which would be a
yourself you're gonna
limit,
cut back.
yeah.
Also, it could just be like the friend might just be saying something like, hey, maybe I should masturbate less.
Right.
But it's not really that big of a deal to them either. So it's
Yeah,
like,
right.
oh, I'd like to change this,
Right.
but it doesn't get prioritized necessarily.
Yeah. So interesting debate about this in the DSM-5.
Is it a
where-
big debate? Like a mass debate?
Oh, there it is. God, he's got him all ready. He's just queued up for
But
this. He's just, I know, that's what we need. We need access to drops over here. I think we should be able to hit buttons. But alas, we have no power. So, all right. In the DSM-5, we're now on the DSM-5-TR. DSM-5 was going to include a chapter for further study called hypersexuality disorder. But it was politically untenable because people thought, hey, we don't need an excuse in our society for sexual behavior that's causing problems. We don't need people getting this diagnosis, and now they're able to, kind of access health care instead of punishment, because as a puritanical American society, we'd rather criminalize all sexuality than address it if it's out of control. And then there was also a contingent in the psychology community that said if you have hypersexuality disorder in the book, you're going to pathologize high libido and sexual tastes and interests, and we don't want to do that. We already have an entire chapter of the DSM-5 that already seems to describe sex acts as bad, like exhibitionism and fetishes like voyeurism and things like that, and frauderism. These are all isms that are inside the DSM-5 and the sex.
I don't even know what that last one is.
Frauderism?
Yeah, what is that?
Sexually attracted to Sigmund Freud.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Freuderism. Just a little
Elbow patches,
Sigmundism.
tweed jackets, and
Got him
elbow
into
patches.
this guy. Yeah, he's got a three-piece suit. Yes. Frauderism, I believe, is rubbing up against people randomly.
Huh.
So, like in public places,
All right.
trying to make sexual contact with them in inconspicuous ways.
Yeah.
So that. So yeah, like the pro
So
sex
a
contingent.
form of sexual assault, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
I suppose, yeah.
Essentially, I believe it's been a while since I've looked up frauderism. So the sex positive contingent at the time was like, we don't need one more thing being pathologized, especially this. So it got left out of the book. I was really hoping that a DSM-5 TR, it would make its way back in, because for a long time I've wanted this to be understood as a process addiction, just like we have gambling disorder, which does exist in the DSM-5 TR in the appendix section. I think that this should be in there too. It is not. However, the international... Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the other thing that's important for it to get into the DSM-5, it's not just about having some sort of agreement, but it's having sufficient enough research behind it to support it. I think that's part of it too, because there's a lot of stuff that like it needs further study, as in like we all kind of agree there's something significant here, but we don't have the scientific backing in order to make a like
fair.
Criteria for
That's
it.
fair. Yeah, I won't. Yeah, you're right. I shouldn't characterize it as strictly political, but I don't know what the science debate on it was. It felt like it was disqualified for that. So the ICD-10 or 11, I don't even know what number we're on, which is the international diagnostic code that we generally do use, does have a label for this. We call it compulsive sexual disorder or compulsive sexuality. It is a code. It does exist. But going back to Nick's definition writer, that's how we describe that concept of addiction. When we're talking about compulsive behavior that somebody cannot quit, when we classify it as a problem, we're looking for those big 4 factors. And if we don't see all 4 of those, then we don't really start to classify it as like this is clinical, it needs treatment. But if a person says, look, this is a problem for me, I feel it's compulsive, then I'm very comfortable with them describing that to me. If I was talking to a patient and they had this background story, but I wasn't checking much of the boxes of the 4 C's, but they seemed hypersexual and they said, look, I'm doing this, I feel like I have to do it, I feel like I have to do it throughout the day, then I would probably be comfortable thinking about that as compulsive masturbation. But I wouldn't necessarily pathologize it. I would ask the patient, does this bother you? Does this cause you harm? Is this something you need to stop? Is it getting in the way of life? And if they said, no, I just do it a lot, then I'd probably say, well, I don't have an opinion about that, right? Unless you end up in a relationship and now this behavior is somehow complicating or harming your relationship and you would like to deal with that, then we can all sit down and talk about that. But, until there's some kind of negative harm in your world, just frequency is not enough, I think, to classify anything.
The other thing to take a look at, too, this is kind of an old school approach to kind of look at addiction. To your friend, if they're at all concerned about this, one of the easiest ways to test biopsychosocial addiction is to just remove it and see what happens.
Okay.
Right?
Can you?
Yeah, well, not just can you, but just look at what the results are. Like alcohol, for example.
Right.
If I remove it and I don't have any kind of negative reaction physiologically, then I don't have a physiological dependence on it.
Sure, so it's one box unchecked.
Exactly.
Yeah, I hear you.
Psychological, like how does it affect my thought processes? How does it affect my behaviors and things like that?
Yeah.
And then sociological, so if I remove it, how does it impact my social functioning?
Yeah.
So if you remove it and there's no impact in those 3 areas, then that's a pretty good sign that it's
good data.
not. Yeah,
it's good data. Now I want
to
to add a caveat to what you're saying, because I know how you mean that. But you and I have both treated patients where they're like, "Hey, look, man, I'm not an alcoholic," and you're like, "Are you sure?" And like, "Yeah, I didn't drink for 30 days, so clearly it's not a problem. I was able to quit for 30 days, so now I've earned the right to go drink. I'm just going to do it in moderation again." And then we're like, "That's your pattern doesn't show that that's going to happen. Like as soon as you start drinking again, this gets out of control. You become self-destructive. You clearly have a lifelong chronic problem with this." But a lot of people have convinced themselves, "Oh, look at me. I was sober for X number of days from problem. Therefore, problem must not exist."
No. Yeah, but I would argue, though, in those cases that we're talking about, it wasn't that they removed it and there were no problems. It's that they removed it, there were problems, and then they worked through those problems. The problems went away, and now they're absent the problems.
Right.
And making the argument, oh, now the problems don't exist, so I can go back to drinking.
Right.
Like, well, no.
Which is also a telltale sign that maybe you do have an alcohol problem.
Yeah.
I got sober so I could drink again, but I don't have an alcohol problem.
Yeah.
Are you sure, bud? Are you sure? It kind of sounds like those things are holding hands.
Yeah.
But yeah, good question. It gives us a chance to talk about process addiction, which is different than chemical addiction, but every bit as much as interesting and definitely can cause a lot of challenges. If you are out there and you hear us describing those criteria of addiction, and you hear about this word sex addiction is, in my view, absolutely a thing. Again, I'm separating clinical words from, colloquial words. So yes, sex addiction is a thing. You can just Google Sex Addicts Anonymous, SAA. That is a national organization, just like Alcoholics Anonymous. There is also Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. A lot of women feel more comfortable with SLAA, and they also, both organizations have meetings across the country, online meetings, anonymous meetings, in-person meetings, phone meetings. They both have excellent texts that you can buy, you can download, and they're very, very helpful. There's a lot of people that have gone through that and need to go through a program or need that support to regain control of their lives. And so if that's you, if you identify in those ways and you say, yeah, my sexual desires and compulsions have caused me a lot of harm and a lot of self-sabotage, I don't feel like I have control over this in my life, you might want to look into that and get that help, because it's out there. And there's a lot of therapists that specialize in sex addiction and are willing to treat it. I've worked a lot with sex addiction, but what happens is whenever you go online and you type in sex addict, or not that, but you type in sex therapist, you're usually going to find AASECT therapists, AASECT, which are very sex-positive therapists, and they're there to help you replenish and restore your sex life. But if you ask them, hey, I think I have compulsive sexuality, or I think I'm a sex addict, they're very likely to say, that's not a real thing. Your libido and your sexual appetite is exactly as it needs to be, and society be damned if there's consequences for your actions. And okay, and so they have their approach. I have my approach. Mine is, I come from addictionology, so I would like your appetites to fit your life in ways that do not cause you harm. So, Sex Addicts Anonymous, or Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, worth checking out. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about restoring trust with a new therapist after the last one broke you. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Today's episode is brought to you by Judy Schneider, Mason Miller, Leon Kassab, Newstick, Dirty B, Sarah Smith, BP, and Kodiak. Would you like to sponsor a show? Become a therapy producer at patreon.com/therapy and watch Jim fight a gorilla. And today's episode is brought to you by our therapy producers, and our topic is shoes.
All right.
Okay, shoes.
Laces.
Yeah.
Final answer.
He got there first.
The founder of LA Gear went on to create this shoe company in 1992. Is it A, Keds, B, And One, C, K-Swiss, or D, Skechers? If you would like to join the therapy
I was really
producers and
hoping
make
the
the
answer
show
was going to be
possible.
British Knights.
91.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about British
yeah.
Go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up.
All right, so LA Gear creator went on to create
In 91.
In 92.
92.
Skechers,
Keds,
Keds,
K1, or And One,
and one.
K-Swiss, and Skechers.
Man,
I'm going to go Skechers.
those all feel really viable. I feel like Skechers has to be older than that,
Yeah, I mean
but I don't have any definitive.
that's why I'm
reason
getting rid.
why.
That's why I'm Xing out Keds.
Ye-
I feel like Keds are older than that.
probably older
but maybe
than
not.
that. Man, I'm gonna go with And One, because I feel like the 90s were very filled with that brand. But I mean, I have no reason to associate that with LA. All right, I'm gonna go with And One.
I think And One is Shaquille O'Neal's shoe brand.
You know what? I think you and I both think that, because the little figurine guy looks like him, but I don't think his brand was just Shaq, and
Okay.
he was sponsored by Reebok. I remember that because he has a whole story about coming out of a store and a mother yelling at him because NBA players had expensive shoes, and he was broken because he was like, yeah, my mom couldn't afford shoes for me, and so he went to Walmart, made a deal with Reebok. And to this day, I believe he has the most shoe sales of any NBA player ever, because he was the only one to ever have an affordable shoe.
Jim is maybe right about this Shaq thing, but wrong about And One.
Shit!
It is Skechers.
All right.
Oh, really?
So Jacob takes the lead.
Wow. Did you guys ever have the shoes with the lights inside?
No.
Oh, those were pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't have those.
I did try to make my own pumps, though.
I always wanted pumps.
I did too. I wanted the Reebok pumps, but
Yeah.
I never got them.
Oh, those things were cool. You
Yeah.
tried to make them?
Yeah, I took some other kid was throwing out his shoes, and he had like cut them all apart, and he took the whole pump thing out.
Okay.
So I was like, I'll take that. So I took it and put it in my shoes.
Oh, you
Yeah,
tried to just
yeah.
cut open the tongue of your shoe and
Yeah.
just put a pump in there?
That's pretty funny.
That's a good offer. Yeah, I think it was a good move. I mean,
Yeah.
nice try.
Yeah,
I don't imagine it worked very well.
they kind of fall out when running.
Yeah. Kind of become a tripping hazard.
Yeah.
All right, so I read the wrong title for our next letter. The real title is 16 and Pregnant with a 25-year-old man's baby.
Okay.
From Anonymous. Hi, I don't know where to start. I was a 14-year-old child, pursued and groomed by a 23-year-old man. I know this now. I got pregnant at 15, which is when my parents found out I was sexually active. Had a forced abortion 3 days later, and it was never spoken about again. I was never forbidden to see my ex, and we continued on. We are in Dominican culture, by the way.
Okay.
Dominican culture doesn't see anything wrong with these age gaps. At 16, he was 25, he pressured me into trying again, and we got pregnant. My son was born 9 months later. I was a senior in high school. My son is now 14 years old and the love of my life. I am 31 and still cannot look my ex in the face without wanting to punch it. We split in 2016 when I was 25 and truly came to terms with the fact that this was not what relationships are supposed to be like. Our relationship was wrought with drinking and violence on both ends, substance abuse and infidelity. At 25, I thought I was too old and washed up because he cheated on me with younger girls, 17 to 20. My family still treats him kindly and allows him around their children. How can I move forward with the knowledge that he is a predator? How can I move forward with the knowledge that my parents left me in the care of an abusive predator? I can't shake this resentment. I'm in therapy currently, but don't feel like I'm making much progress on this front. Relationships are hard for me because I have a lot of trust issues, and no matter how many affirmations I try, I still struggle greatly with my self-esteem. Thanks, guys. Anonymous.
Okay. So I think there's a lot of information here as far as the relationship and everything that, all the specifics with that. But ultimately, I kind of feel like we can really just boil this down to the resentment piece. And then, I mean, for anybody else who's listening to this and maybe can't relate to the specific story, I'll bet you can relate to the resentment.
Yeah,
Because
right.
everybody has that to some degree.
Right.
And everybody kind of goes through that piece where you have to learn how to let that go.
Right.
And I empathize with the writer because that's incredibly difficult. And I think one of the hardest things about that is it's kind of like you're holding on to something because you feel like that's some sort of justice.
Yeah.
As in, like, if I hold on to resentment, if I carry this resentment, then it's a way of somehow getting even with the person or somehow holding them accountable to what they've done. But in all reality, you're the only one that carries that weight.
Right.
That resentment is just a backpack full of bricks that you are carrying, and whether you choose to carry that or you choose to set it down, either way, it has zero impact whatsoever on the person who you resent for it.
Yeah.
And so I think once you kind of start to get to that point where you realize that if I choose to carry this, he could live a wonderful life. If I choose to set it down, he could live a wonderful life.
Right.
Or if I keep it or let's set it down and he lives a terrible life. However his life is, it has nothing to do with whether or not you choose to carry the resentment.
Yeah.
The resentment only affects you.
Right.
And so I think once you finally get to that point of understanding and realizing that, then you kind of have to change your mindset of it. And you're like, okay, well, I'm not setting this down for him. I'm setting this down for me.
Right. So one thing that this letter talks about that I'm grateful for because it allows us in this show to shine a light on this and discuss it. Sexuality in various cultures and the way that there have been sort of these normalized abuses. I'm watching this documentary series on fundamental Mormonism and like Warren Jeffs and all that crazy stuff. And like it was remarkable that here in the United States, there was an entire region of the country that just had child brides. And like they were just doing that.
Yeah.
And they were trafficking these people, and they were like taking boys and just traffic them as slave labor. It was unreal, but it was their culture. And so like the surrounding authorities kind of had this mentality of sort of like, leave them to themselves, right? Like, not our problem, not our communities. They have their little townships. They self-regulate. They don't seem to cause anybody else any harm. The families are fine with it. They're raised in it. Not our business. The child brides and these teenage girls, they seem perfectly happy to just start their little families and whatever. And so like people just turned a blind eye to this, failing to appreciate that no matter how happy these child brides seem or whatever's going on, they do not fundamentally have the ability to consent to this. Fundamentally, they're just not an adult. They cannot consent to this. And so what the writer's talking about, I know nothing about Dominican culture, so I won't comment on that. But there are many cultures around the world and in the United States that like there is this normalized sort of allowance for this kind of behavior. And it's just accepted, you know, and I have tons of patients from various cultures that constantly tell me about this is how it is done. Like, you know, I have lots of people from the Philippines because we live in the Western United States. So we get a lot of folks that have come here from the Philippines. And it is too much of a trend that they tell me about just systemic abuse in their culture and their families. And of course, that's you don't want to paint with too broad of a brush. But the fact that it's as prominent as it is in the island and in their society without being, you know, illegal or challenged or whatever is terrifying. And so this kind of letter, in this case, I think shines a light. And I think the writer is saying, look, my culture influenced my family. It influenced me. It influenced this man. And like none of us did anything about this. I was 14. I was 15. I was a kid. He was in his mid-20s. Like that's not acceptable. And so for the writer to then later say, look, it really bothers me that like adults of the modern age turned a blind eye to their child being in a serious relationship with a predator. The definition of a predator. I get it. I understand why the writer is horrified and just like blown away by how obviously wrong this is. But like you paint over it with this thin veneer of like, oh, but in our society, whatever, like this is fine or whatever, or maybe it's not legal technically, but like we allow it. This is a problem around the world, and it does happen a lot more than people talk about it. And my eyes just keep popping open every time I hear a story like this, or I have a patient with a story like this, or I see a documentary, and it blows my mind that this exists. But I still agree with Nick that when you're writing about your own resentment and how you get to peace, and you're talking about the frustration you feel because other people don't seem horrified by this, and now you have this deep, you know, sense of hatred for not only the father, you know, but also the parents who just allowed you to do this, and then like the decade of like terrible relationship abuse that you went through and substance abuse because again, you were a child. You've never had a normal, stable, healthy relationship. You were never introduced to healthy romance or any kind of boundary setting or normal expectations. You were a victim your whole life. So the fact that you're free of that now at 31, I'm glad that you now have some amount of self-directed authority in your life. And you said that you're already doing therapy for this, which would have been my number one thing that I'd want you to do. You talk about how it's slow going, that you don't feel like you're making much progress.
I'm thrilled to hear that they aren't taking it out on the kid, though.
That's huge.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Because that's easy. That's
a lot of
that's
people
really
do that.
easy to do.
You get resentful,
Yep.
and every time you see the child, you think, "Darn
The kid. You love the kid. You said the kid's the love of your
symbolize
life.
things.
That's
you
wonderful.
Know, that's huge that you've parented the right way, and I think your anger is, you know, a righteous anger. I guess is the only thing I
And I
want to
think
say
it's
about
directed fairly.
that. You're aiming it in the right direction.
Yeah.
And, you know, it also doesn't necessarily profit you.
That's the thing that I wanted to say is like, I mean, you're angry and you don't have there's not an end to your anger.
Yes, and I would agree in the sense that, well, and as it ties into the resentment piece,
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about letting go of resentment, I want to make it clear that that doesn't mean that you're wrong for having anger.
No.
Or that doesn't mean that your anger is misdirected. What it means is it's basically asking the question, is your anger productive?
Mm.
Is it leading to anything? Is it helpful in any way?
Right.
Or is it just keeping you stuck?
I believe your anger is justified.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it is justifiable anger, and it is reasonable and fair that you are angry.
Yes. And I think it's important to point out anger can be 100% justified and unhealthy.
And not do any good for you.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think it sounds to me like that's kind of where you're at and where you're stuck. You know, with the whole self-esteem piece that you talk about, the thing that kind of goes through my head is I'm wondering, so where does your self-worth come from as far as how you identify your value as a person? What are the criteria that you set for that? And because I'm just kind of curious, maybe there's nothing here, but I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking of, is just because if it's tied to the resentment piece, is it that you feel like your worth or your value is somehow tied to other people instead of what you have to offer for yourself?
Well, and look at what she would have been raised in. I mean, like, you're coming of age, you're at 14, 15 years old, and that is so young. That is like 8th, 9th grade, man. And like at that age, you're being introduced to motherhood. You're being introduced to an adult who takes a shine to you. And so, like, of course, you're a child. That's why we don't allow this, because you're going to be enamored with this adult. He's going to embody physical perfection. And there's going to be this sense of like, wow, I've been selected by this grown up who's like, oh, cool and handsome or something like that, and feels powerful. And of course, then later on, you find out he's an absolute dope and like, a loser. But to a 14, 15-year-old, you're enamored with that. So you never learn value. You don't learn to see yourself as valuable. And this person just abuses you for years and just throws you away. Now you feel like you have to chase them.
And you've never really created individual identity either.
Right.
I mean, at 14, you're in a relationship. You're in a serious relationship.
How did you
Your
ever
personality
find yourself?
doesn't even fully develop until
No.
your mid-20s.
No. And now you're forming according to the other person. You're conforming to what they want so that you can keep them. Plus you have their baby. And so like now you're really desperately trying to hold on and like keep it. That's a lot for a kid.
Yeah.
You can't even do algebra. And like this is what you're facing. In fairness, I also can't do algebra. But I feel like a little bit different. So in this case, Ryder, I guess I'm glad to hear you're doing the therapeutic work. I want to encourage you when you say, look, it's slow going. Yeah, this is going to be slow going. I mean, these were your formative, identity-driven years. I believe that you can grow from this. I believe you are growing from this. I believe that your experiences in many ways can inform you and give you a rich human history to draw upon that is not wasted in your life. I think there's much that you bring to the present. And at the same time, that sense of self and self-respect and self-esteem, it's going to take a long time to rebuild that. I'm really glad that you're in therapy, because somebody who's been through this kind of history is very susceptible to being manipulated or abused again.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're very vulnerable to that because they are fragile, because they don't have a sense of self or gravitas or a foundation. They tend to feel very natural in conforming to another person. So having that checkpoint of that therapist who you can hear your words bouncing off of, that gives you perspective, that could really be helpful. I think this part of the phase is going to be slow, but in the future, this might be really important.
I'm almost a little hesitant to really give you tips or techniques or anything like that to deal with resentment, because I don't want to get in the way of whatever your therapist is doing.
Right.
I assume your therapist has a plan for dealing with this.
Right.
And I don't want you going back to your therapist and be like, oh, this radio host says that I should do this.
Right.
It's maybe counterproductive, but I would really direct you back to your therapist and just really be honest and very forthcoming about, like, I'm carrying these resentments. I would really hope that you explore that a little bit.
Right.
As to what these resentments are, what they mean to you, who they're really affecting, and why you're choosing to hold on to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe even take some thought into what would it look like to actually be able to set something down.
Yeah.
This one particular resentment that I have with person X, if I were to set this down, what would that look like?
Right.
What would be the long-term, short-term benefits of doing that? What is the thing that's keeping me from setting it down? And I don't know. I just kind of explore that. But again, like I would direct you back to your therapist on how to do that.
Yeah. And I would also offer, I get that reading affirmations out loud or writing affirmations can sometimes feel very arbitrary. That's never really been a strong point for me when I've tried to do affirmative work for myself. It's never felt right. It's never felt true. It's always felt a little bit hollow. That doesn't mean that I don't benefit from the work and I don't need to do it. I probably need to do it because it feels so hollow. But I understand and respect that sometimes it doesn't feel right. An alternate that you could try for affirmational work is to kind of look back on the negative experiences that you've had and ask yourself, how did that experience give me strength and qualities? Is there another way to describe what I've been through that doesn't just describe me as the victim, though of course in many ways I was, but can I look back and can I describe the same set of scenarios from an angle of empowerment? Can I see myself as an empowered person who's been through unique things that in some ways have given me more resources than perhaps another person has? I mean, I became a mother at a young age. I had to conquer very specific challenges. I had a youthfulness to my motherhood that perhaps gave me a lot more experiences with my child that maybe other people didn't get to have. There might be ways still to find things that you've overcome, frame it as positives, and at least give yourself the dignity of saying, look, at the hell I've been through, I am the kind of person who can survive hell. And you know what? That's affirmational too. So sometimes there's a way to kind of see that silver lining inside of the terrible things. But, you know, Ryder, I'm so grateful for this question because I think it shines a light on a problem that doesn't get enough attention, that too often is excused as just being internal culture stuff and not the business of society or not the business of others. And that is absolutely not true. It is all of our business. It is us as a community's business to protect those who cannot protect themselves. And the fact that they happen to come from a certain group of people with a language or history or identity is irrelevant to the fact that these humans still have rights and they need to be treated with dignity and respect that reflect modern culture and modern standards. So I'm glad for this. I think it shines a light where we need to shine a light. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to talk about, as Jim opens up this question,
Fragile friendships.
Fragile friendships.
Today's episode is
Fragile.
brought to you by Judy Schneider, Mason Miller, Leon Kassab, New Stick, Dirty B, Sarah Smith, BP, and Kodiak. If you too want to become a therapy producer, head on over to patreon.com/therapy. And our second shoe question is, which designer is known for red-soled women's shoes? Is it A, Christian Louboutin, B, Manolo Blahnik, Blahnik,
Nailed it.
Manolo Blahnik,
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Jeffrey Campbell,
Thank you.
or Jessica Simpson? If you would like to join the Therapy Producers to make the show possible, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
Shoes with red soles.
This question comes to you from Laura.
Okay, I was going to ask if Laura did this.
Yeah.
She did.
I want Jessica Simpson final answer.
I know the answer.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Why do you know the
you
answer?
lock it in. You lock it in Jessica Simpson, huh?
Yeah.
Great.
That's the best I got.
I'll take A, Christian Louboutin.
Why do
Not
you know
only
that?
not only did Laura predict or write this question,
Yeah.
she predicted he would get it right.
What?
Yeah,
What?
Thank you, Laura.
First off, Laura, what the hell?
it
What
is
the
Christian
hell?
Louboutin.
Yeah.
Why do you know that?
I work with lots of very wealthy, fashionable people.
And that's like a popular shoe?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if you looked it up, you would see it and you'd be like, "Oh, okay."
I
'Cause
doubt
I had
that. I
tons
doubt
of
that
celeb-
very highly.
Tons of major celebrities wear them all the time.
I had no idea this
yeah.
was even a
Does
thing.
Shaquille
but then
O'Neal?
Probably.
Yeah. Were they released under his label?
He probably doesn't wear them. I guarantee he's bought a pair.
Really?
No, they have a men's line as well.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, they have.
It's
They're
just
very
a shoe with a red inside?
no. The red sole on the bottom of the shoe.
Bottom of the
So
shoe
imagine
is red.
like a black high heel
Yeah,
shoe.
okay.
The bottom is red.
where you can see the bottom of
You
it
can
as,
just-
as somebody's walking past.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's like the symbol of that brand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Man. Also, the fact that you're aware that the shoe exists, fine. I accept
Uh-huh.
that. The fact that you know people that happily wear that shoe.
Yep.
I do not dispute that. It doesn't bother me. The fact that you know the weird-ass French person name that goes with that shoe.
Well, that's what the shoe is called.
Oh, I thought it was
That
the
is the
person who made it.
It is. It's
It
both.
is. Yeah.
That is the brand name.
Is that how it is with a lot of things? Is there really a man named Gucci?
Is that how things work?
I mean, there was a man named Ford.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's cars.
Okay.
But like, was there a
That's
Gucci?
a thing. That's a product. I
Is-
believe Gucci is a family
Is
name.
Prada
Yes.
a thing?
I don't know.
Is there really a Paul Mitchell?
I believe so.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I guess a lot of fashion stuff is just named for the person, huh?
Yeah.
Huh.
Dior,
Dior's a thing?
Hugo Boss.
Well, I
Wow.
am slightly disappointed because
Tommy Hilfiger.
I have
Yep.
a kick-ass tiebreaker.
Okay.
It's interactive.
Oh, boy.
So even though we don't need it, we'll do it in Patreon.
Even though
we'll do it.
even
we'll
though
do it
I
after the
smashed
show.
it today.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
did.
Wow.
2-0.
So we'll create a bet for the.
Can it
Great.
be double or nothing?
No, actually, what it is, it's so I was at the doctor's office today
Uh-huh.
or this week. As I was sitting there, Mark Davis
Okay.
leaves.
Oh, I saw you on Twitter
so
about this.
he leaves.
He's the owner of the Raiders.
owner of the
Las
Raiders.
Vegas Raiders football team.
Most
so he-
obvious
so he's-
haircut in the history of
Yeah.
haircuts.
So he leaves. He was in that same doctor's office. And then so I posted that on Discord when I was there for 5 minutes. And somebody brought up the idea that should be the next bet.
Oh, is you got to cut your
Loser
hair
has to get that haircut.
the Mark Davis haircut?
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
There's not enough money. There's
I
not
mean, there's enough money. It's not a bet on a trivia
It's not-
question though.
It's not a pod therapy.
Yeah. I thought a good bet.
That is outside of your budget, my friend.
Yeah. So when I was in San Diego, there was a henna person, on the side of the thing.
Yeah.
there,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
was like, oh, that'd be a good bet. Like, you got to get a tramp stamp
We
henna
said
tattoo.
that.
Oh,
we
did we?
that at one
Yeah.
point.
Oh,
Yeah.
is that how I got that tattoo? God, it's all a blur now.
No, I brought up the henna
Crazy night.
tattoo.
Oh.
I think a henna neck tattoo.
Oh, no. No. Henna tramp stamp I would do.
Jim's just wearing a turtleneck for a month.
What's with the Steve Jobs phase you're going through, Jim?
It's July in the desert. Why?
It's chilly in the air. All right. Fragile friendships.
I'm surprised you didn't know Christian Louboutin.
What?
That
really?
that surprises me.
Really?
It does.
Really?
That is pretty
Really?
ubiquitous.
From the guy
Really?
who says he can beat up a gorilla.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
surprised he
Really?
doesn't know
This
Christian
is the
Louboutin.
day that you thought I would know that?
Slut.
Fragile friendships like ours. I just found your podcast and I'm obsessed and trying to catch up in all the episodes.
And I bet you know Louboutin shoes, don't
Well,
you?
nobody knows what that is. As a Vegas native and person who listens to Ice Cream Social and person who knows some of the guests that you've had, I can't believe I went so long without discovering you guys.
Oh, interesting.
That's funny. Thank you for doing this, and I plan to join the Patreon group next month when I get back in town to help support your efforts. Thanks for creating something with so much value.
That's nice.
That is nice. Hopefully this question is in line with the types of questions you guys take. I dread when one of my friends gets a significant other, or worse, gets married, or worse, gets married and has children, because 99% of the time I feel like I lose them as a friend, or as a friend in a similar capacity as they were. I completely understand that a significant other will take up more time and energy from them, change some dynamics, and that friendships evolve, and I'm okay with that. But it seems to change how they show up as a friend to me. There are a couple of trends that I find happen. One is they become a we person, where they basically become one unit with their partner and every response is about if we are available.
All right.
And they never do anything without the other person. Another is they become dependent on this other person and suddenly change and become someone completely different to fit what they think their new partner wants. Another is they become absorbed by this other person and spend 110% of their time with them, and I never see them again. I'm sure I play a role in these outcomes, that my perception is probably skewed, and that there are a multitude of things I can do to try to yield different results in individual instances. But, generally speaking, what the hell is going on? I feel like I'm just a temporary stand-in until someone finds their life partner, and then they can do life with them, and they don't need my friendship thereafter. I'm so bothered by this that I've made it very important to me that whenever I'm in a relationship that I still maintain my autonomy, my authenticity, and my friendships. It makes me very reluctant to trust in my friendships. Is this just the way of things? Thanks, guys. Anonymous.
Yep.
Yeah.
Moving on.
I think that's it.
You've just been life coached.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I can totally relate to this. I not so much with friends that get into a serious relationship or anything like that, but more so friends that have kids.
Mm.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, well, goodbye.
Goodbye
Right.
forever.
we'll never see each other
I had
again.
a friend who told me that we should, like, they were pregnant, and told SJ and I that we should get pregnant.
Oh, that.
Because it would allow our friendship
Mm-hmm.
to continue kind of as it already was.
Yeah.
They think highly of that friendship.
Yeah.
I was like, A, no. And B, like, shit changes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it's not always. I don't want to say a bad thing, but it's not always something that is about you or even something about their life changes or something like that. I mean, it is their life changes, but ultimately, I think everything just becomes 10 times harder to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I mean, seeing some friends that have young children, it's like getting groceries.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Is just
Everything's
a
a
nightmare.
chore.
Like everything is just so much harder. And so it's like, even if they make plans, like, well, let's hang out, we're going to do something this weekend.
Right.
It's so
Those are
many
very
things.
fragile.
So
Very
many
fragile
things could
plans.
come up.
Because
And
if little Bobby didn't take a nap, hey, we
Yeah.
can't do this.
yeah.
And then the other person's like, what the heck, man? Like,
Yeah, because your
come
kid
on.
didn't take a fucking nap.
Yeah, like
Get over
get in
it.
control
Come
of
on.
your life.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
come on, I'm another human.
Yeah.
Respect my time. And like, you're not wrong, friend. Like, I get it. I respect you. And if I bring the screaming child to this situation, you're gonna hate me. And like, we're not gonna have a good friendship or a good day. So I'm doing us all a favor by bailing on you. But I get it. At some point, it's like it's a wounded relationship.
Now, I don't have kids, but I know what it's like to have kids. I've got dogs.
You do have dogs, yeah, which is identical. It's how's the college fund going for those dogs?
Successful.
yeah. Good.
Sorry, I
good.
couldn't- I couldn't resist.
Yeah, it's
Um,
identical.
Yeah, but no, I empathize, man. I hear you.
Especially when you go from okay, what is worse when it comes to losing a friend? Are you going to lose your friend when they go from single to partnered, or from partnered to child?
Oh, partner to child.
That's the biggest
Yes,
drop.
I think
yeah,
so.
I do too.
That's when they're gone.
I mean, I there's some friends, that have got that, when we used to hang out all the time when they were single, then they got into a relationship and like, you just don't hear from them anymore.
Yeah.
Or they like try to make plans or whatever. Let's go golf. Let's go do whatever. I can't. So
Yeah.
we're doing, like, okay, that happens. But you can still, I think if you're in a relationship, you can still carve out time.
Right.
It's not that big of a commitment.
Yeah.
You can still make it work but children, like you have a human being that cannot survive without
Right.
you. And that just completely changes everything.
Yeah, it is a game changer. So my life started very young. I got married at 20. And so that definitely happened where like I had buddies and I had my crew and all these guys I always hung out with and everybody's there for you and you're always together. And then like you get hitched and you're like, oh, this won't be a big deal because we're young adults or whatever. We're still going to hang out with our buddies and do what we do. And no, that of course didn't happen. And like one by one, I kind of phantomed away from all my friends. And I remember my friends at the time being very resentful of that. Now we were very young. If this happens in your 30s, you're like, hey, I'm a mature guy. Like, take care, buddy. I don't hate you. Whatever.
You got married at what age? 20?
20.
Wow. So you couldn't even drink at your own.
No,
wedding.
I couldn't. No, they wouldn't serve me at our own wedding. Yeah, we had apple juice. So like, yeah, sparkling apple juice. That's a thing. So like, I lost friends at that time, and I remember they were really resentful. And I remember, at the time, my college
I
roommate.
bet they got over it.
Yeah, I'm sure they're all fine and better off now. Eddie was the only one that really stuck around. And, Eddie was always, I think, a really good friend in that regard because he was always, he would let me just use the friendship. So, like, whenever I was free, I'd reach out to him. Hey, man, can we hang out? And he was always just available. And he wasn't resentful that when he'd reach out, I wasn't always available. Then fast forward, I have a kid. And I remember that was even worse. Like after that, like you said, the drop off is terrible. I always have something else I have to be doing. And no matter what plans I think I've made, at a moment's notice, I could read the room and say, nope, not going to leave today and have a terrible week with my whole household because I abandoned ship. I have this obligation. It trumps everything. And there's no predicting the weather on this. But to his credit, I remember once I had flaked on him like 3 or 4 times. in a series, right? We used to like to go to the park and play disc golf. And like every once in a while, we'd catch a weekend where we could do that. He'd check with me every weekend to see if I was available. If he checked with me on a Wednesday, I was like, yeah, man, I'd love to do that. Thursday, I'd be like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Friday, I was like, I'm definitely not going to make it. Saturday, he'd call and I wouldn't answer, and so it was just terrible. And the friendship was so one-sided, and I knew that. And one day we finally got a chance to go out, and, we're out there throwing the discs, having a good time, and I'm just really enjoying it. And I told him, man, I am so sincerely sorry for how often I have stood you up and flaked on you last second. And like, I'm really sorry. And I just felt very emotional in that moment. I was so grateful that he stuck around. He's the only person that still talked to me. And, I was a new dad and I had no outlets, and he would still hang out with me and let me bitch and like talk to me as a friend. And like no time had passed. And I remember I told him, man, I'm so sorry that I do this to you. Sincerely, you are a good man and you're just always there for me. And dude, he said like the kindest thing in the world to me. He's a really good human. Yeah, he told me, go fuck yourself.
Who are you?
Too. Yeah. He said, yeah, exactly. And he said, Jim, I would be so disappointed in you if you didn't blow me off for your family. Like, we grew up together. Like, I would hope you're the kind of guy that would be a dad first and bullshit with his buddies and have beers, second. I'd be really disappointed if you were that guy. And I was like, wow, man, like that. He's like, you always have permission to blow me off. And like, yeah, it sucks, but like, it's fine. And so like, and that was always a very kind position of him to take.
Yeah.
Shitty. It's tough to be him in that situation. But I, as the guy who flakes, I was always deeply appreciative of that idea.
So to the writer, you kind of hinted at like, is it me? Is there something I can do?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
No, it's definitely not you. Right. But is there something you can do? Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe the writer just isn't very fun to hang out with.
Yeah, that could be a
might
factor,
be them.
guys. I mean, what are you
Let's not
trying
ignore
to
this
do?
completely.
Yeah, if you're sending text like, "Hey, Nick, you want to play Guess Who?"
Yeah.
I'm busy, man.
I only call Jim to do stuff when I need to move.
Yeah.
I
don't even call Jim then.
No, but so here's one thing maybe you take a look at, okay, is you obviously have a very pessimistic perspective towards this.
Sure, that it'll never get better.
And I recognize it because I do too, okay? But the best thing you can do is recognize that.
Yeah.
Because if you're very aware of that, other people probably pick up on it too.
Right.
And that may contribute to how hard somebody really wants to work.
Yeah.
To overcome obstacles to hang out on a weekend. Right. So the best thing you can do, I would probably sum it up this way. The best thing you can do is to channel your inner Eddie. We're never going to be able to live up to Eddie.
No, he's really just like a monk.
But
floating up in his
But the best you can do
palace.
to get close to Eddie and practice Eddie-like behavior.
Eddie essence, really.
Eddie essence.
Yes.
Channel your Eddie essence.
Yes.
I wish he listened to that would be my best advice.
I don't blame him for not listening.
Or alternate advice, get uglier friends. Like that seems like that's low-hanging fruit, man. Just get really ugly friends or horrible friends. They're just terrible people that nobody would ever want to date. And they will always be available to hang out with you.
There's that too.
Right?
I'm not gonna dismiss that.
I'm telling you, man, that's the solid answer right there. So, but I hope
and
that
if
you feel
all else fails, find a gorilla.
Yeah. You want a rear naked show.
Gorillas
fight it.
Yeah.
Apparently make great friends. They're not threatening at all.
Yeah. Not very paternal, those gorillas. They'll just hang out. They're always having time for beers with their buddies. Well, we are at the end of our show. We want to thank all of you who, for whatever reason, support us at patreon.com/therapy. And we've got some new TheraPals. Who's new to the bunch?
We got Jacob Hunt joining us this week. Welcome, Jacob.
It's definitely Jacob Hurt, but keep going.
Oh, crap. Sorry. I'm getting old. I got my glasses on. And Miguel.
Yes.
Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you to our new TheraPals. And thank you, of course, to our TheraProducers, those saccharine and mysterious, shrouded Illuminati members of the fan club. We're talking about Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, King of Student Loan Debt, Dr. Ben Don, Crazy Banana Scoop, Mason Miller, Carolyn Albert, Leon Kassab, Kevin Chamberlain, Malia, Richard Macy, Cindy Ash, Newstick, Lord Colin Stewart, Dirty B, Ben Stanley, Sammy Scoop, Sarah Smith, Adam Hathaway, Byler T, University Jeff, Tess Miller, Take It Evie podcast, Cody Mitchell, Kodiak, and Paris.
And if you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited,
And why wouldn't you?
and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, go to patreon.com/therapy. And thank you for supporting mental health.
That is all the time we've got for this week's session. We want to thank Matt Mattingly's Ice Cream Social Podcast, our landlords, and thanks to all of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something to keep all to yourself. Share the episode with someone who needs it. You can open up the description in your podcast app and copy and paste the link we provided. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter, I burped, at PodTherapyGuys, at Instagram at PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangent.
I'm Louis Vuitton.
Thank you, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
Was that the shoe guy?
Nope.
No. Is that
Christian
also a person?
Louboutin.
Man,
Louboutin
I was
is
pretty
is one
close.
name.
I was really close.
We'll round up.
Yeah, I feel I feel like if you round up Louis Vuitton, I'm
All
not
right.
wrong. Oh, is this the tiebreaker?
Here's our tiebreaker.
Oh yeah, see, patrons. This
Oh,
is
they're
what you pay for.
envelopes.
Oh
Nick is
my
holding
gosh,
envelopes.
this is high class.
Each of you has an envelope in front of you.
Okay.
Should I open it?
Oh.
Inside the envelope, you will find pictures
Of crimes I have witnessed you commit. These have been submitted to the state marshal.
of Nike Air Jordans.
Dude, the fact that you put this much effort into
Your
this is
task.
very impressive.
How do we put them in order?
Put them in chronological